Hey everybody, Brent with Advanced Vape Supply. Today we're going to clean the molecule and take it apart, rebuild it, install a new coil, basically cover everything you need to know about the molecule. So starting out, this is my personal molecule that is heavily used. It's probably had at least a gram, maybe a gram and a half put through it already. As you can see, it's kind of darker around the lower edges. There's a little bit of dark oil pooling, so that's, gross reclaim. We want to get rid of that. So to clean my mod right now, my temperature control is accurate. So when I fire it, the temp goes up, everything works as it should. So if I turn it up to 600, my coil won't glow, because in temperature control, stainless steel should not glow at 600 degrees. But we'll turn it up to 550 and pulse the coil. Now you can see a lot more smoking coming off, or you can see vapor coming off the coil, but at this temperature, some of that is actually being combusted. So now in temperature control, holding it down like that at 550, a lot of it smokes off the reclaim, and then the rest melts down to this bottom here. The post holes are on the sides over here, so I have it pooling down at the bottom away from those leg holes / post holes. It helps if you blow on the coil while you're firing it. Now you'll want to do this in a ventilated room, or like in a bathroom with a fan on, because it will not smell the best. And I just stick, after heating it, you don't want to do it while the coil is still super warm, but just stick the cotton swab in there and rotate it side to side. Don't do like a scrubbing rubby motion, just dab it in, rotate side to side, twist it so that it kind of rotates around the bowl. And you want to push it so that it goes down around the coil and gets the whole bowl. And then you want to make sure that no fibers were left behind, which it looks like there's no fibers. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it again and pulse it so that more reclaim, more reclaim drops out of the coil. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and turn the temperature up to 600 now. And it's, temping out at 600. And there's no glowing at 600. So that's how I know this coil is set up properly. Doesn't glow. And now there's another dark pool of reclaim below the coil there. So I'll go ahead and swab that up. And swab the whole bowl again. You'll find that reclaim kind of creeps up the side of the bowl. Some of the reclaim that's underneath the bowl or in the post holes will actually wick back up through the coil itself and come out, which I'll pulse it again. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you might be able to actually see the oil come out of the leg holes and from the coil and drop down to the base there. So we'll go ahead and dab that out. Now I kind of burnt my Q-tip on there, so that's why you don't want to do it while the coil's hot. I'm going to get a new Q-tip now, fire it again one more time, just a few pulses. You don't want to heat it directly to 600 degrees. It's best to just do short pulses and work your way up towards 600. And then now that I'm at 600, I will tilt it again, let off the button, blow on it a little bit so the coil doesn't burn the Q-tip, and I'll kind of just stick it down in all the little crevices again and around the bowl. Make sure there's no fibers. Alright, and so you can see the Q-tip the Q-tip has very little. There's pretty much nothing on there. And so now if I heat it up, there's still a little vapor coming off, but there shouldn't be much. So there's a tiny amount of vapor coming off that coil. So I could have got it a little cleaner, you know, if I would have dipped the Q-tip in rubbing alcohol and cleaned it out by swabbing it with rubbing alcohol, and then you just have to make sure to let it dry. But it's the exact same process with rubbing alcohol, and that gets it a lot cleaner. So that was with no rubbing alcohol. Because I'm using temperature control and my coil is properly set up and configured, you can see that I have no carbon deposits. I mean, my coil literally came almost perfectly clean, and that was with nothing more than a Q-tip and heat. So now if I take rubbing alcohol, I can even get, you know, really deep clean on that and get it pretty much completely fresh just by doing that exact same process that I just did, but with alcohol on the Q-tip. And that's it. That's all you have to do to clean it. I do this maybe every 3 to 5 loads, depending on how you use it. And so I'll cover that here in a little bit. Now let's go ahead and because the device is already warmed up, let's go ahead and take it apart. Whenever you want to take the molecule apart, it is best to do, you know, some pulsing like this, warm it up so that everything's nice and loose. Now if you look under the deck, you'll see I do have very slight amount of reclaim sitting right on top there, but you can see that it got nowhere near to the edge, you know, reaching the edge of the threads or anything like that. When this gets a little reclaim under it, it creates a little seal on itself basically, and that also prevents further reclaim from coming down under the coil legs. Here's the bottom view of our coil. All in all, pretty good condition for how much wax that it saw. Okay, so I'm going to set this little coil jar over here to hold all the parts as I remove them. Okay, so now we remove the post screws. Get my hex driver to get a good grip on this one. Okay, so that one doesn't want to come out. We're going to go ahead and just move on to this other one. And I'm sure that one will come out when we put it in the alcohol. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and remove the molecule from the base. Now, also, I should have pointed out that you want to lock your mod or turn off your mod before you do this. The next step is to then remove the 510 pin. It's just a flathead screw basically. Once it's out, it helps to actually use the 510 pin to push the positive post up. So you can take the hex tool, stick it up through there, and push the post out. Depending on how oily it is, it can be pretty hard. If you soak the base in rubbing alcohol first, that can help. If the peak doesn't come out, you want to be careful when you're pushing it up, because if you push on the center part of it right in the middle there, you can actually damage it. So you want to push up on the edges or corners of the peak insulator. Want to be careful with it that you don't damage it. Now, like I said, this is seen, you know, a gram or so, probably a couple grams. So there is some buildup inside. Anyway, last but not least, you got to push out this insulator on bottom, and you can do it from the top. You just push, alternating directions till it rocks itself out. This is the molecule base, completely torn down. I mean, the only thing still in it is that one screw in that post that didn't want to come out. There you go. So we have the base. Now I'm going to put some 91% ISO in here. I could let it soak, but because I have all the parts exposed, I'm not even going to worry about that. You can let it soak if you want to get into these post holes and threads a little more, but this device wasn't super dirty or anything. So make sure you clean the top of the post, clean the 510 thread, set that on the paper towel to dry. Helps if you blow on the post holes to blow any alcohol out. You can also rinse these off with hot water after you've done this to remove any additional residues, etc., or rinse it with rubbing alcohol again. But this is pretty clean, so I'm not going to worry about that. Basically just swab everything down. Get it all nice and clean. Okay, I'm just kind of drying off all the parts on the paper towel. It helps if you blow in the holes to push the alcohol out. Okay, that looks pretty dang dry. You can also take, a dry Q-tip to just make sure these are dry before you put them back together. Okay, so we start out by inserting the PEEK insulator. Should just kind of snap right in. Then the positive post, make sure that your post hole is upward, correct orientation. Push that in, flip it around, and then we have this other insulator. You want to do it with the larger opening facing towards you or facing the bottom. And then you insert the 510 pin, and this is critical that this deck is flush. You can see, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's kind of poking up a little bit right now. So I'm going to push that down with my thumb to make sure that it's all the way down. and I'm going to apply slight pressure while I tighten the 510 pin. And as soon as it snugs up, I stop there. I don't, tighten it super tight or anything like that, because if you do tighten it down, you can actually pull the positive post down a little bit in the center and pinch the peak and damage it, and then it'll cause the side of the positive post to rock up, rocking the quartz up, and then the housing can smash that. If you have this loose for any reason, the 510 pin on the atomizer can push up on that and also push the positive post up, resulting in the quartz pushing up and the quartz housing, or the housing smashing the quartz. So if you experience quartz breakage from the housing smashing the quartz, it's very likely that your positive post isn't flush with the deck, and that it simply needs to be adjusted, where, like this, where you hold it down and tighten the 510 pin. So that's done. We're going to go ahead and install that back onto the mod. If you have a new molecule, you'll want to torque it down using the dab tool. Once your threads are worn in, you don't have to worry about that as much, because everything starts working better. We'll go ahead and put our post screws back in. Just a little bit. You want to make sure that the post holes are completely open, that the screw doesn't stick into the hole at all. You just want to get it to where it starts to, right before it enters the post hole. Okay. Now we have our molecule coil. We'll go ahead and insert this into the cup, putting it through the leg holes. And then I use a little metal tool, little coil jig piece, to hold the coil. There's other ways to do this. You can stuff a paper towel in there to hold it if you want. And then cut the legs to be close to 3 millimeters in length. Insert them into the molecule like so. And then tighten the legs down. You don't want to tighten them super tight. As soon as it snugs up, that's good. Move to the other side. You'll actually be able to re-tighten these once the device is warm and the metal is a little softer while it's warm. So you just want to get it snug right now so that it's making a good secure connection and that it's holding down like that. So we have a good, we have the molecule installed. We'll go ahead and turn the mod back on. Oh, I'm getting atomizer low because I didn't turn the mod off before I worked with it to begin with. So now we'll remove this, and to do that you'll want to stick the dab tool into the negative post. This is the post that does not have the peak insulator on it, and you want to do that so that you don't short it out. So now it's reading no atomizer. I go ahead and tighten it down. 0.35 ohm looks perfect. But the coil hasn't been prepared, so we know it's not going to temperature control accurately. We're going to turn this down to 13 watts, and we're going to turn the lights down so that it's easier to see if it starts to glow. And now we're going to fire at 13 watts. While firing at 13 watts, we're looking for any color changes in the coil or any glowing at all. So right now there is a very faint glow, and it's kind of coming up in the middle. but there is one little spot that looks like it's getting really hot compared to everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and push on that spot and kind of just strum this coil a little bit. And then we'll try firing it again. Okay, so now it's getting hot up at this upper right corner on that leg, so I'm going to push on that leg, push it down a little bit, and then kind of strum that area now. Now I'll fire it again for a few seconds. And now it's the leg on the opposite side, so go ahead and kind of, I'm just going to go ahead and just push all over the coil, kind of poke it a little bit, strum the whole thing, strum the top, strum the bottom, strum across the middle. And I know that the lighting's not very good, but my other videos show this. I'm just strumming the whole coil. Now I'm going to fire it again. Oh, very good. So it looks like it's almost firing right. So I'm going to go ahead and just strum it out some more. Sorry, this light's flickering, so I need to fix that. Still getting some hot spotting over on this side of the coil. So I'm just going to strum that part of the coil now, fire it again. Okay, so it appears to be firing pretty evenly, but it can be deceiving because you could have a hot spot underneath the coil or inside between, you know, the smashed wraps. There could be a little hot spot. And so that's where a lot of the issues can come in to play for the coil. And so if you end up having problems and you just use it in wattage mode for a while, hotspots will typically resolve themselves through use and oxidation of the coil. So eventually, if you just use it in wattage mode, it will burn itself in, although your performance won't be the best until it does burn itself in. So it does appear to be firing good now, but I always try to tell people, if it seems to look like that it's firing right and all that, it doesn't hurt to do a couple more strum and burn cycles just to be sure. That way when you do go into temperature control mode, it's just a pain-free experience. So, strummed the heck out of it. Going to fire it one more time. Perfect. It is firing perfectly from the center. So, all of this was done at 13 watts. I didn't change my temperature at any point. I just strummed the heck out of the coil. It has a nice bluish appearance to it. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. It's really just patience, strumming, and now you don't want to bend the coil. If you move the coil too much, it will change resistance. So if I'm sitting in here with the dab tool and I grab on the side of the coil here and I lift it up a little bit on accident, it will actually mess up the way this coil reads its resistance, and it will throw you out of temperature control. So now that the coil's set, I don't ever want to let that coil move around. And through use, so after I use it a few times, the coil will continue to temper as you use it, and it will become stiffer and stiffer and stiffer. Eventually, it won't move, its resistance won't be affected if you stab it with your dab tool. But rule of thumb is, after you do this initial dry burn and you get it set up, you kind of want to be a little gentle with the coil. You don't ever want to just jab it with your dab tool or be rough on it. You kind of just want to drop your dab on it and be done with it. You don't want to jab this coil. So now that we've given it a minute to cool off, I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the non-insulated negative post and unscrew it a little bit from the mod. And then I'm going to change the mod back to stainless steel temperature control. I'm just using the stock Wismec firmware. And one thing about Joytex and Wismecs and all of these Chinese mods is that they read the resistance as you're tightening down. So if you don't tighten down, what happened there is I slipped and this didn't tighten all the way down, as you can see. So it's reading 0.4 ohm because it was pulling the reading as I was tightening it down. So because it was kind of loose because I didn't finish tightening it down all the way, it read the resistance high. So with Joyetech mods, part of the success of getting it to work in temperature control, as silly as this may seem, is screwing the device in as fast as you can, trying to get it fully tightened down before the mod takes that initial resistance reading. So now it's reading 0.36. I didn't do anything different except tightened it down faster. That right there can make all the difference with these cheaper mods. So now my TC is probably going to work perfectly. Let's go ahead and see. Oh, look at that. First try. So a big part of it is just how you prepare the coil and then how you actually put the device onto the mod. And this is where DNA mods really shine. They don't take their reading like that. They take the reading after the device is installed. So that's a critical part of using these Wismec mods. I personally don't like Arctic Fox. It seems to be very temperamental. I like just the factory firmware because it's simple, or a DNA, because DNAs are undoubtedly the best. The reason I do everything with the Joytex and the reason I personally use this is I like its small size. And let's be realistic, not everyone wants to go buy a DNA. So I'm trying to use the same devices that the majority of people are using. And the majority of people are using these Joyetech type temperature control devices. So I strongly recommend a DNA if you have the money. If you don't, you can still achieve great results with a simple Joyetech mod or a Wismec mod like this. It's just all about how you tighten it down and your procedure in preparing the coil. So this video is ending up to be a little long, and I'm not a professional videographer, so I apologize. You know, I've cleared my throat a lot, I say a lot, and all of that. This video is intended to just be very informative and to kind of introduce you guys to this. And now, to celebrate rebuilding this, we're going to do a dab of some strawberry amnesia so we can forget everything we just learned. So this is a pretty big portion. You can literally load half that and still get really good results. But we're gonna go for gold right now. So I kind of just set it on the coil like that, right on the center, the best you can. You can also pulse it a little bit to heat up the coil so that it melts off the tool into the coil. That works best when you don't have the housing on, because if the tool contacts the housing and the coil at the same time, it'll short out. But if you have just the quartz on, it won't short if you touch the tool to the coil. So that is primed up and ready to go. Today I'm using a glass strip tip. It's the same, you know, basic shape and design as the stock drip tip, but due to it being glass, there are a lot of variances in shape and size. So still working on bringing the glass drip tips to the Molecule on mainstream. There are also drip tips like this that you can use. Alright, back to what we're doing. Let's go ahead and take a rip. I'm doing this at 420 at 18 watts. Ooh. That was a huge rip. So my temperature control works spot on. That's exactly the size of a hit and the flavor I would expect from 420. That was a big load. I did that kind of intentionally so we would get some reclaim. I'm going to turn the light up a little bit. So so we did get a little, little reclaim on the side here, or a little bit of oil. Still good oil. So what you can actually do is just take your tool and scrape it back towards the coil and back on top. And then you can take another fat rip. So we'll go ahead and do another one. I'm trying my best not to cough, guys, so bear with me. Okay, so I've now got two pretty good sized rips, and there is virtually no reclaim left in there. I mean, it is literally residue. It's just a very thin film residue. Now that residue does build up, but that's not really going to impact my flavor at all, because it's not being vaporized. It's not even really heating that much over there, because of the way this coil is designed. It's pretty much designed to only heat up and vaporize what it's actually touching. So anything it's not touching is not going to vaporize. It might get warm, and that's about it. I can continue to load this several more times, and eventually that will get built up like it was at the start of this video, and then you can just swab it out like I showed and keep going, 3 or 4 more times. After you do that a few times, you really do have to ISO it though to get it fresh again, and then it is helpful to once in a while just break down the whole thing, clean the whole thing like I did in this video, and then rebuild it and fire the coil like I did, screw it into the mod like I did, and your temperature control should work flawlessly. I mean, this is a stock Wismec. I haven't done anything to it, and it's temperature controlling just as good as my DNA's. Well, I take that back. I'm sorry. My DNA is a little better, obviously, but this is comparable. I mean, I could hit this and hit my DNA, and they're so close that for most people it's not worth justifying the extra expense. I do love my DNAs though, so it's really up to you on how much money you want to spend, but I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone they need a DNA, because they don't. You can get comparable results with a cheap mod like this. It's just in how you use it. Oh, one last thing. So my leg holes are right there and right there. So when I hit my mod, I actually tilt it this way so that the oil goes to that side, away from those leg holes. And then I'll tilt it back this way so that the oil that's on this side that pooled up will actually run back down through the coil and get vaporized as it touches the coil. But by doing that, whenever reclaim slips off the coil or oil slips off the coil, it goes down to this side that has no holes in the bottom. And then when I flip it around the other way, it goes back through the coil, vaporizing much of that oil. And then, what's left is pretty much just reclaim after a few loads. And as long as you're tilting it back and forth to avoid those leg holes, you will reduce a great amount of that leakage. Pretty much everything will just go side to side. And then by sucking through the device after you've let off the power button, it cools all of that oil back down, so it re-solidifies and stays where it pooled up. So as long as you do that and you follow basically that technique of tilting it so that the pool moves away from those leg holes, and you continue to suck through it for a few seconds after you're done with your hit, you won't completely negate that problem, but you will significantly reduce it to a point that you probably don't mind it so much. Yeah, so that's the video. That concludes everything. I hope this was informative. If anyone has questions, let me know.